The galaxy had a rule. A simple one. Never wake a sleeping predator. The Galactic Council had followed that rule for 40 years. Until the day they broke it. The emergency session was called without warning. No ceremonies. No formal greetings. Just silence. Heavy. Oppressive. The kind of silence that comes right before extinction. In the center of the chamber, a hologram burned. 23 systems. All red. All dead. Consumed. Ambassador Rel Theri of the Elysian stood at the center platform, her translucent skin flickering with stress patterns. The Vorax swarm has accelerated. Her voice trembled. They are no longer expanding in waves. She paused. They are hunting. A ripple of fear spread across the chamber. Commander Draxel slammed his armored fist onto the table. Then we meet them in battle. You already did, another voice replied. Cold. Sharp. Unforgiving. All eyes turned. High Strategist Velker stepped forward. We deployed 900 warships across 3 defensive lines. He gestured toward the hologram. They lasted 11 minutes. Silence again. This time worse. Because now there was no denial left. They adapt, Velker continued. Every weapon we use, they learn. Every tactic we deploy, they counter. They are not just a swarm. He looked up. They are evolution weaponized. A younger delegate spoke. What about evacuation? Velker didn't even look at him. They move faster than our transports. Another voice, quieter this time. Negotiation? A low, bitter sound echoed across the chamber. Negotiation requires intelligence, Velker said. And empathy. The Vorax have neither. Then, a word. One word. Soft. But it cut through the room like a blade. Humans. Everything stopped. Literally. Even the hologram flickered. No. The response came instantly. From multiple delegates. From multiple species. No. Absolutely not. Out of the question. But the one who spoke didn't back down. Elder Counselor Marith stood slowly. Ancient. Fragile. But her eyes were sharp as ever. We are already dead, she said calmly. Humans just determine how long it takes. You don't understand what you're suggesting, Commander Draxel snapped. Oh, I understand perfectly, Marith replied. I read their history. Did you? No one answered. Because they all had. A death world. Category 7. Unstable climate. Extreme gravity. Predator-dense ecosystem. And somehow, the dominant species was the worst predator of all. They kill their own kind, someone whispered. Not just kill, Marith corrected. They perfected it. Images flashed across the hologram. Wars. Explosions. Cities burning. Weapons that split atoms. Biological agents. Machines designed purely to destroy. They turned their entire history into one long lesson. Marith's voice dropped. On how to kill more efficiently. And you want to invite that into the galaxy? Draxel demanded. Marith met his gaze. No. She shook her head slowly. I want to aim it. Silence again. But this time, different. Not fear. Something worse. Consideration. They were quarantined for a reason, Velker said. Yes, Marith nodded. Because we were afraid. She stepped forward. But tell me. She gestured to the burning systems. Are you still more afraid of them? Or of this? No one answered. Because everyone knew the truth. The vote took less than 3 minutes. It passed by one. The message sent to Earth was simple. No diplomacy. No pride. No lies. We are losing. We cannot stop them. We need your help. 3 days later, a reply came. It contained only one sentence. You should not have called us. And then, coordinates. Far from the Council's reach. At the edge of a quiet system. Space, tour open. No elegant entry. No graceful arrival. It looked like reality itself had been ripped apart. From that wound, they came. Black ships. Scarred. Heavy. Built like weapons, not vessels. At their center, a single flagship. Its name burned across the hull. Oblivion. Inside, a man stood watching the stars. Commander Ethan Kane. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just said one thing. Set course. A pause. Then, let's see what thinks it's the apex predator now. The ships moved. And somewhere, deep in the void, the swarm felt something new. Not prey. Not resistance. Something else. Something worse. It felt hunted. The Council was not prepared for how the humans would arrive. Defense Station Karos 9 orbited a dying star. It had been chosen as the meeting point for one reason: distance. If something went wrong, it wouldn't spread. Admiral Velker stood on the command deck, watching the empty void. His claws tapped against the railing. A nervous habit, one he hadn't shown in decades. "Time," he asked. 30 seconds, the sensor officer replied. The room held its breath. Then, space broke. Not bent. Not warped. Broken. A violent tear ripped open reality itself. No warning signatures. No gradual emergence. Just rupture. The human fleet didn't arrive. They forced their way in. 20 ships. All black. All damaged. All very, very alive. Velker felt something cold crawl up his spine. "These are warships?" he whispered. "No," said the sensor officer quietly. "These are survivors." The largest ship drifted forward. Slow. Deliberate. Predatory. Oblivion. Even the name felt wrong. Like it wasn't meant to be read. A transmission came through. No handshake protocols. No identity verification. No diplomatic channel. Just a voice. "This is Commander Ethan Kane. Pause. Transmit all enemy data." Velker blinked. "That's it?" one of his officers asked. "No greeting." "No." "Send it," Velker interrupted. Something in that voice said delay would be a mistake. Minutes later, a shuttle detached from the human flagship. It didn't glide. It dropped. Like a bullet. "Docking trajectory is aggressive," the station AI warned. "Let it land," Velker said. The shuttle slammed into the docking bay with a metallic thunder. The entire station shook. Silence followed. Then, the door opened, and the humans stepped out. There were 12 of them. They moved in silence. Not marching. Not walking. Hunting. Their armor was black. Matte. Absorbing light. Their helmets reflected nothing. Velker's honor guard shifted uneasily. These were elite warriors. Veterans of 100 battles. And yet, they looked like prey. The first human removed her helmet. Dark eyes. Sharp. Calculating. "Lieutenant Mara Vance," she said flatly. "Area secure." She didn't wait for a response. She moved, checking corners, angles, exits, like she expected something to attack, or something to hide. The others followed, each one scanning, each one silent. And then, he stepped out. Commander Ethan Kane. No armor decoration. No insignia. No rank displayed. He didn't need it. Velker knew instantly. This was the one. "Commander," Velker said carefully. "Welcome to briefing room," Kane interrupted. Velker stopped mid-sentence. Kane looked at him. Gray eyes. Cold. Measured. Talk while walking. The briefing began immediately. No introductions. No ceremony. No wasted time. The hologram lit up. Swarm ships. Swarm structures. Swarm movement patterns. Kane didn't sit. He stood. Watching. Silent. His team spread out behind him. Already analyzing. Already working. "Pause," Kane said. The hologram froze. He stepped closer. Zoomed in on a section. A swarm formation. "You're fighting them wrong." Velker stiffened. "We've tried every." "You're fighting like prey," Kane said. Silence. "They're predators," Kane continued. "They think like predators. They adapt like predators." He turned. "And you're meeting them head on." Velker's voice hardened. "That's called war." Kane shook his head slightly. "No. That's called dying." One of the humans stepped forward. Large. Broad. Scarred armor. "Sergeant Cole," he said. He tapped the display. "You don't fight a predator with strength." He zoomed in. Highlighted weak points. Movement gaps. Behavior loops. "You isolate it. You confuse it. You break its pattern." He looked at the council officers. "Then you kill it." Another human spoke. Smaller. Quiet. Almost invisible. "Signal patterns are primitive," she said. "Chemical and low-frequency communication." Velker frowned. "And?" She looked up. A slight smile. "I can rewrite them." The room went still. "Rewrite?" Someone whispered. She nodded. "Make them attack each other. Make them panic. Make them blind." Velker felt something shift inside him. Not hope. Something darker. Kane stepped forward again. "We need specimens." Velker blinked. "That's impossible. They consume everything. No one has ever captured." "We will," Kane said. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. 6 hours later. They launched. Velker watched from orbit. The target. A partially converted moon. Swarm activity, extreme. "Sending 12 soldiers into that is suicide," one officer muttered. Velker didn't respond. Because something told him. They weren't the ones in danger. The dropship landed. The surface was alive. Organic growth. Pulsing structures. Moving ground. A nightmare. And into that nightmare, the humans walked. They didn't stay together. They spread out. Vanishing. Like shadows. Swarm drones appeared. Hundreds. Then thousands. Velker leaned forward. This is where it ends. It didn't. It began. Gunfire. Precise. Controlled. Not panic. Not chaos. Execution. Each human moved with purpose. Flanking. Cutting. Isolating. Drones fell before they could react. Coal fired. Entire clusters vanished. Vance moved. Every shot a kill. The quiet one. She didn't fire. She listened. And then, the swarm hesitated. Just for a second. But that was enough. Because Kane moved. And everything changed. He didn't fight. He hunted. Closing distance. Breaking lines. Tearing through enemies like he knew exactly where they would be. Velker felt his breath catch. How? He whispered. No one answered. Because there was no answer. Only one truth. They weren't reacting. They were predicting. 20 minutes later. Silence. The swarm. Gone. The humans stood. Covered in blood. Holding. 3 live specimens. Back on the station. Velker stared through the containment glass. The creatures thrashed. Screamed. But Kane just watched. Calm. Still. You knew. Velker said quietly. Kane didn't look at him. We learned, he replied. Velker swallowed. No species adapts that fast. Now. Kane turned. You don't understand. His eyes locked onto Velker. We've been doing this. Pause. To each other. A beat. For thousands of years. Velker stepped back. For the first time in his life. He felt fear. Not of the swarm. But of what they had called to stop it. Far away. Deep in the void. The swarm shifted. Not advancing. Not feeding. Reacting. Because something new had entered the galaxy. Something that didn't behave like prey. Something that didn't behave like a normal predator. Something worse. Something that never stops hunting. The first thing the swarm noticed was silence. Not the absence of sound. That meant nothing to them. This was different. It was the absence of signals. Entire sections of their network. Gone. No deaths reported. No distress calls. Just nothing. Hive node K-77 attempted to re-establish contact. It sent out a pulse. No response. Another. Still nothing. Then, a reply. But it was wrong. The signal carried the right structure. The right frequency. But the meaning was chaos. Conflicting commands. Broken patterns. False directives. And for the first time, the swarm hesitated. On the bridge of the oblivion. Lisa Chun watched the data stream. Her fingers moved rapidly across the interface. They're trying to reconnect, she said calmly. Kane stood behind her. Let them. Lisa tilted her head slightly. Then, she injected another signal. Across the system, swarm units received new orders. Retreat. Advance. Attack. Halt. All at once. The result was beautiful. Chaos. Drones turned on each other. Ships drifted out of formation. Entire clusters collapsed from confusion alone. Velker watched the feed in horror. You're not just fighting them, he whispered. Lisa didn't look up. No. We're teaching them fear. And then, the attacks began. Not fleets. Not armies. Ghosts. A swarm breeding vessel in deep orbit. Exploded. No warning. No enemy ships detected. Just gone. 3 hours later. Another. Then another. Then 5 more. The swarm adapted quickly. They increased patrols. Tightened formations. Reinforced defenses. It didn't matter. Because the humans weren't fighting their defenses. They were fighting their assumptions. Predators expect patterns, Kane said during briefing. He tapped the hologram. So we give them none. Strike teams deployed across multiple systems. Small. Fast. Untraceable. They hit supply lines. Command nodes. Queen relays. Never staying. Never repeating. Always watching. Ben Torres lay flat against the hull of a drifting asteroid. Below him, a swarm convoy passed. Hundreds of ships. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. His voice came through the calm. Target confirmed. Pause. Wait for it. Another pause. Wait. Then. Now. Explosions tore through the convoy from the inside. Charges planted hours earlier. Hidden. Patient. The convoy never saw it coming. Back on the station, Velker stared at the reports. This isn't war. No, Kane replied. This is correction. But war always takes something in return. The mission on Virex 6 was supposed to be simple. Infiltrate. Destroy a nutrient core. Extract. Standard. Until it wasn't. The swarm had learned. Not enough to win, but enough to react. As Apex unit moved through the tunnels, the walls shifted, closed, separated them. Ambush, Cole growled. Drones flooded in. Thousands. Too many. Fall back. Vance ordered. They regrouped. Fought. Moved. But the swarm kept coming. Endless. Relentless. Ryan Hale covered the rear. Young. Fast. Sharp. Go, he shouted. I'll hold them. No one stays behind. Kane snapped. Ryan didn't respond. He just smiled. Someone has to. The tunnel collapsed, separating him from the team. Velker watched from orbit. Get him out, he demanded. But the feed showed the truth. Ryan was alone, and the swarm was coming. He fired. Precise. Efficient. Every shot a kill. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. His ammo ran dry. He switched weapons. Knife. Closer now. Blood. Movement. Violence. Commander. Ryan's voice came through calm. Good hunting. King didn't respond. He just listened. Then, a click, and light. The explosion collapsed the tunnel. Erased everything. Ryan. The swarm. The entire chamber. Gone. Silence filled the command deck. Velker lowered his head. It's over, he whispered. No, Kane said. His voice was different. Colder. Sharper. It just became personal. The next order shocked everyone. Turn us around. Velker looked up. You're retreating? Kane's eyes met his. We're advancing. Apex unit went back in. Not to extract. Not to survive. To erase. What followed was not a mission. It was a purge. They moved through the hive like a storm. No stealth. No restraint. Just destruction. Cole unleashed weapons Velker had never seen. Walls melted. Tunnels collapsed. Lisa flooded the network with one signal. Pain. Endless. Overlapping. Inescapable. Ben tracked every movement. Every escape path. Closed them. And Kane didn't stop. Didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. He hunted. Hours later, they emerged, carrying what remained of Ryan. Velker approached slowly. You lost a soldier. Kane didn't look at him. We lost one of ours. There's a difference? Velker asked. Now, Kane turned. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not anger. Not grief. Something deeper. Yes, he said quietly. Now there's a debt. Far across the galaxy, the swarm began to change. Not tactics. Not formations. Behavior. They hesitated in the dark. They avoided empty space. They clustered tighter. Because something was out there. Something that didn't just kill. Something that remembered. And something that would not stop. The swarm had faced predators before, but never one that hunted for revenge. It just became personal. The next order shocked everyone. Turn us around. Velker looked up. You're retreating? Kane's eyes met his. We're advancing. Apex unit went back in. Not to extract. Not to survive. To erase. What followed was not a mission. It was a purge. They moved through the hive like a storm. No stealth. No restraint. Just destruction. Cole unleashed weapons Velker had never seen. Walls melted. Tunnels collapsed. Lisa flooded the network with one signal. Pain. Endless. Overlapping. Inescapable. Ben tracked every movement. Every escape path. Closed them. And Kane didn't stop. Didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. He hunted. Hours later, they emerged, carrying what remained of Ryan. Velker approached slowly. You lost a soldier. Kane didn't look at him. We lost one of ours. There's a difference? Velker asked. Now, Kane turned. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not anger. Not grief. Something deeper. Yes, he said quietly. Now there's a debt. Far across the galaxy, the swarm began to change. Not tactics. Not formations. Behavior. They hesitated in the dark. They avoided empty space. They clustered tighter. Because something was out there. Something that didn't just kill. Something that remembered. And something that would not stop. The swarm had faced predators before, but never one that hunted for revenge. The swarm had no word for fear. It had instincts, reactions, survival patterns. But fear? Fear required understanding. And the swarm was beginning to understand. It started small. A patrol group drifting through empty space. No threats detected. No anomalies. Then, a sound. Not physical. Not external. Inside their network. A signal. Familiar. Recognized. A queen's death scream. Every drone froze. The signal repeated. Over and over. Layered. Distorted. Wrong. On the bridge of the oblivion. Lisa Chen leaned back slightly. Signal loop holding, she said. Before her, a waveform pulsed across the display. A recording. Captured weeks ago. The exact moment a swarm queen died. Her scream. Her final command. Her panic. Lisa replayed it. Again. And again. And again. Across the system. Entire swarm clusters began to collapse. Drones turned inward. Ships lost cohesion. Command structures failed. Velker stared in disbelief. You're using their own minds against them. Lisa nodded. They share everything. She tapped the screen. So we give them something they can't process. What is that? Velker asked quietly. Lisa looked at him. And for a moment, there was no emotion. Trauma. The war changed after that. It stopped being a conflict. It became a hunt. Human strike teams no longer just destroyed targets. They left messages. A drifting swarm ship was found. Empty. Its interior, covered in carved markings. Not random. Symbols. Patterns. Velker studied the images. What is this? Lisa glanced at it. Coordinates. Coordinates to what? Lisa didn't answer immediately. Then, to the next attack. Another hive cluster received a transmission. A visual feed. Blurry. Distorted. But clear enough. A swarm drone. Captured. Restrained. Then, the feed showed its dissection. Slow. Clinical. Deliberate. The signal cut. Minutes later, that entire cluster self-destructed. Velker stepped back from the display. This is beyond war. Kane stood beside him. Watching. They learn fast, Kane said. So do we. Far deeper in swarm territory. At the center of everything. She felt it. Hive Queen Zithra. Ancient. Vast. She had consumed hundreds of species. Absorbed their knowledge. Their instincts. Their memories. She understood predators. She was one. But this was new. The memories flooding back through her network. Didn't make sense. Drones dying without cause. Ships vanishing in silence. Signals that contradicted reality. Pain without purpose. And something else. Something worse. Intent. These enemies did not consume. Did not expand. Did not retreat. They targeted. They chose. They remembered. And they came back. Zithra processed the data again. And again. And again. Conclusion. This was not predation. This was something else. On the oblivion. Kane stood before the tactical map. Red systems flickered. But fewer now. Much fewer. They're pulling back, Velker said. Yes. Kane zoomed in. They're retreating to a central point. Then we've won, Velker said. Kane didn't respond. Commander? Velker pressed. Kane finally spoke. No. They're going home. Silence. Velker felt it again. That cold feeling. What does that mean? Kane turned. And this time, there was no emptiness in his eyes. There was certainty. It means, pause. We follow. Velker stared at him. You can't be serious. They're retreating. That's victory. Kane shook his head slowly. No. That's survival. The Council will never approve this, Velker said. They don't have to. Velker's voice dropped. You're talking about extermination. Kane stepped closer. Not threatening. Worse. Certain. They ate 17 worlds. They don't get to exist after that. Across the galaxy. The swarm felt it. The pressure. The presence. Closing in. Not chasing. Tracking. Relentless. The swarm had never known retreat. Expansion was survival. Consumption was purpose. To move backward was unthinkable. And yet, they ran. Across burning systems. Past dead worlds. Through shattered fleets. They fled. Behind them, humanity followed. Not fast. Not reckless. Certain. On the bridge of the oblivion. Commander Ethan Kane stood motionless. The tactical display showed it clearly. One destination. One point of convergence. Their homeworld, Velker whispered. It didn't look like a planet. It looked like a wound. A massive sphere of living matter. Pulsing. Breathing. Covered in layers of organic armor. Ships crawled across its surface like parasites. Billions of drones surrounded it. A defensive shell. A last stand. Velker felt dread settle into his bones. That's not a target. That's a fortress. Kane's response was simple. Everything dies. The fleet didn't rush in. They waited. 3 days. Watching. Learning. The swarm prepared. Every drone. Every ship. Every defense. And still, The humans waited. Why? Velker asked. Kane answered without looking away from the display. Because they're watching us too. A pause. And I want them to understand. What's coming? The attack began without warning. Not from the fleet. From within. Explosions tore through the outer defenses. Hidden charges. Planted days earlier. How? Velker started. Persistence, Kane said. Then the fleet moved. Human ships didn't form lines. They scattered. Dove. Vanished into blind spots. Suicide vessels broke formation. Crashing into defensive clusters. Detonating with nuclear force. Each one took dozens of swarm ships with it. Velker watched in shock. They're sacrificing themselves. Kane didn't flinch. They volunteered. And then, the ground assault began. Drop ships rained down onto the living surface. Thousands of humans. Not just soldiers. Volunteers. Teachers. Farmers. Workers. All armed. All ready. All hunting. The surface was hell. The ground moved. The air screamed. Drones came in endless waves. But the humans didn't stop. They pushed forward. Step by step. Through blood. Through fire. Through death. Cold-carved paths through entire swarms. Lisa flooded the network with chaos. Ben guided them through shifting terrain, even as blood poured from his wounds. And Kane led from the front. Always forward. Always hunting. Hours passed. Losses mounted. But they kept moving. Because that's what humans do. They endure. They persist. Finally, they reached the core. The Queen's chamber. Massive. Alive. And at its center, her. Hive Queen Zithra. Ancient. Endless. Her voice filled the chamber. You have one. The humans didn't stop. The swarm will withdraw. Still, they advanced. Why continue? Kane stepped forward. Armor cracked. Blood covering him. Weapons nearly empty. But his eyes, unbroken. Because you don't get to leave. The Queen shifted. You seek extinction. Kane shook his head. No. He raised his weapon. We're sending a message. The chamber went silent. To who? The Queen asked. Kane smiled. Cold. Final. To anything out there that thinks it can do what you did. The Queen understood. Too late. Wait. Kane fired. And hell followed. Every weapon. Every soldier. Every ounce of fury. The Queen screamed. A sound that tore through the hive mind. Across the planet. Across the stars. And then, silence. The swarm stopped. Everywhere. Ships drifted. Drones froze. The mind was gone. The swarm was dead. Weeks later, the Galactic Council gathered again. Same chamber. Same seats. But everything had changed. They saved us, one delegate said. No, Velker replied quietly. They ended it. The humans stood at the center. Fewer now. Wounded. Changed. But still there. Still watching. Will you return to peace? Velker asked Kane. Kane looked at him. For a long moment. Then, no. A pause. We just wait. For what? Velker asked. Kane turned toward the stars. For the next thing. That makes the mistake of hunting. The human fleet departed. Silent. Watching them go. The council felt it. Relief. Gratitude. And something else. Fear. Because now they understood. They hadn't just called for help. They had proven something to the universe. That there was something out there. Worse than any swarm. Worse than any predator. Something that doesn't stop. Doesn't forgive. Doesn't forget. Something born on a death world. That learned to turn war into instinct. An instinct into perfection. Humanity. Far beyond known space. Other things watched. Ancient. Hungry. Patient. They had seen the swarm fall. And for the first time, they hesitated. Because now they knew. The predators had competition.